Okay, it's time to start. Hello everyone, my name is Martin and today we're going to talk about interesting things about iOS development. I'm going to start with the presentation which is called iOS Application Structure for Future-Proof Development. Today we're going to look about the structure of modern mobile applications. Then I'm going to show you how to initialize a project, how to structure it, and also what to expect in the future, not only for the project, but also in terms of iOS development. A few words about me. My name is Martin. I'm CEO of Go Startups and Certify. I have about 10 years experience in startups, 7 of which are experience with iOS development. I enjoy guitars, motorcycles, and airplanes. So let's first start with the structure of modern mobile application. Maybe you know that when you're having a mobile application, you also have that application to be communicating with a server or a backend, with a push notification service, with analytics service, and mostly with the user, because the user is doing all the actions which are in the application and observes the data that is presented to the user. But let's go deeper in the mobile application itself. I have separated it on 3 different layers, which are the presentation layer, or other ways called UI. We have the business layer, which is controlling the data and manipulating the data, and we have the data itself. These 3 different layers in the applications are split into smaller layers. And on the presentation layer, we have the user interface and we have the presentation logic. User interface, in most of the cases with the current iOS development, these are all the storyboards and the views that are presented to the user. We have the presentation logic, which is the flows between the different screens, the animations that are presented, and etc. In the business logic, we have the app facade, we have the components, workflows, and entities. And on the data layer, we have data access, data utilities, and service tools. I'm going to call these layers also with the way that the current application structure in most of the iOS products is made. It is the view, the controller, and the model. And here is the way that they're communicating with each other and with the user. So let's start with the user as main point. The user is seeing what is on the view and interacts with the views itself. Then from the view, it alerts the controller that something has changed, that the user has made some interaction there. And the controller manipulates the model or the data inside the application. When the data has been changed, it needs to update the view so the user sees what is going on there. I'm going to start with the first live demo for today, which is project initialization. I'm going to need a second to restart my screen sharing because it seems that there is a bug in the in-event software. So this is the project that I have prepared for today, but I'm going to start with opening an entirely new project in Xcode. Right now, you may select like multi-platform application. You can select iOS application, macOS, watchOS, tvOS, or other. I'm going to just start with a standard iOS application. We're going to give some name like demo application 1. You can select the team that you're participating for signing the certificates and everything else. You may select also an organization identifier. You can select if you want your interface to be storyboard or Swift UI. And also you may select what do you want to have on the lifecycle. Right now, the current option is only UIKit with tab delegate. For language, of course, we're using Swift. I would not use core data because I'm going to present you which is the best way, in my opinion, to manipulate data and to contain data in the application. And I'm always checking by default to have the tests included in the application, because automated tests is something great that, in my opinion, everyone should be doing, at least from time to time. I'm going to select directory. In most of the case, I'm also creating a Git repository on my Mac. So I have everything split on commits. I can track my changes and do everything else. And I'm not going to change any of the other options. I'm clicking create. The thing that is created right now in my demo application, as in the all iOS applications, is that I have demo application itself, target. I have also a testing target, which is for the unit tests and for the UI tests. From signing in capabilities, everything is blank and by default. The project structure. Let's start with the dependencies.
Maybe you can stop your camera so that your project is visible on a bigger screen.
Okay.
Also, if you have a link to the source code, you can share it in the...
Yeah, I'm going to add the link a bit later.
Okay.
So yeah, right now, yeah, we're going to be using Swift packages, as right now, in my opinion, this is the best way to handle dependencies. I have large experience with CocoaPods and with the other dependency managers for iOS and for macOS development. But in my opinion, the thing that is best right now is Swift packages. It lacks the large repositories that you can easily find the packages, but still, if you're able to search in Google, so not only in Google, but also in GitHub, it is easy to find the right dependency that you need. And something important is that still some of the old Objective-C projects are not still available on Swift packages. But if I want to add a package dependency, I'm just going to click the add button. And for example, as I'm using always Alarm Fire, I'm just going to go to GitHub, pick up, for example, okay, not Alarm Fire, but Realm, which I'm going to tell you a bit later what it is. I'm going to copy the repository URL. I'm going to click next. It is going to verify the repository. I can pick up a version, I can pick up a branch or specific commit, which is available here. And also I can specify the version, which can be up to the next major version. The major version is the first number, next minor version, which is going to be that one. Range, which is from version to version, that works for me, or exact version. In most of the cases, up to next major is perfectly fine for your projects. So right now with Swift packages, they're going to just resolve, download the repository, and initialize to my project, which is probably going to take a few seconds, as we're currently streaming, and that way I can just go ahead. So for the demo today, I'm using two different dependencies. The first one is Alarm of Fire, and actually it is totally optional. I'm going to tell you a bit more about Alarm Fire in a bit, and also Realm. Realm right now, in my opinion, is the best ORM that you can find for iOS and Android. And having it available for both platforms actually saves a lot of time for developing, because let's just face it, like when we're having an iOS application, in like 99.9% of the cases, we're going also to have a native Android application. And the thing that Realm does really good is that you can apply almost the same schema for both iOS and Android. And if there are any bugs, most of the cases they're going to be shared between the platforms. So yeah, we're still resolving Realm, but I'm just going to click cancel because I already have it in the other project that I'm going to present today. So let's go to the project structure. Something that I have been using for a while and for future-proof development is the best structure that you can create is to just split the different layers of the application in different folders. So the first folder that I'm using the most, that actually the view controllers. Then we have the views, we have managers, we have the model, which actually I'm going to move a bit up because that's the way that I'm using it. And we have extensions. Let's first show you the application that I'm doing today. Actually, that is client for GitHub that is showing the issues and the pull requests on a given repository. So it is extremely simple application which has one loading view controller that I'm going to give you more input in a bit. We have one navigation controller and one table view controller. Something that I'm going to show you a bit later is that we also are using Swift UI to create exactly the same thing as with the currently standard architecture and UI for an iOS application. So let's start actually first with the managers and with the data initialization. So in order to do it, I have checked what is the current API that is provided by Google, and I'm going to fetch the current issues and the current pull request for Swift Package Manager. I'm using that URL from the GitHub REST API, and here is all the data that I'm getting. Typically, when I'm starting a project from scratch and when I have so much data, like this thing right now, I'm using a tool which is really useful for me, and it is called QuickType, because you can just paste here everything that you are receiving from the backend, and it is automatically going to generate a class, like coding keys, like everything that you're going to need just to start testing and playing with that API. I'm not keeping that longer than I needed because this is a really cool way to start fast and easily an application, but it is not that sustainable in the time because it is automatically generated. It shows a lot of things that you may not even need. For example, the coding keys here, they're automatically generated from Codable protocol. So in most of the cases, we don't even need this. Also, the init functions, you can also create your custom init functions or don't create one at all, because again, when we're following Codable or encodable or decodable, it has ways to switch from JSON data to objects. So with Realm, the thing that we have, and which is really, really cool to have, is a way to easily easily write the data and the model that we need for our data. For example, for issues and pull requests, I have created a class which is called issue, and I have specified that it's a Realm object. In order to do that, you need to import Realm and Realm Swift, and then you can just inherit object, which is going to give us the functions and the ability to use Realm. I have specified an ID, a number, which is like the PR or ticket number. The ID is given by GitHub, so it is unique. We have the title, we have number of comments, we have created that, updated that, and a body. In order to have my data be updated based on a primary key, I'm setting it up by overriding the static function in a Realm object, which is called primary key. And I'm returning the path, the name of the variable that I'm going to use for that. It needs to be an integer, UUID, string, and few other types that you can easily check in Realm documentation. I'm not going to need that one for now. I'm going to need it for later, but I'm going to show you why I'm going to need it then. So we have our bottom layer of the application, which is to have the right data model, which is written here. And we're going to switch to the managers. When I'm working with projects, especially when they're from scratch, I'm using 3 different managers, which are extremely important for the application. That is the Waco Data Manager, which is handling all operations which are related with Realm. For example, initialization of the Realm, configuration, migrations that needs to be done, and also I'm providing 2 static, actually 1 static variable, actually a constant, and 1 static, class variable. In order to initialize Realm, you need to do create a snippet. For me, you need to just create a Realm configuration. That is optional in the beginning when you're starting to develop an application, but it is a must later, because in the configuration, you're specifying the schema version, and then you're specifying the migration block. When you're changing Realm properties, it acts actually as a relational database. Because, for example, if I want to change the type of a property, for example, if ID, I want to have it like string, then I'm going to have to execute a migration in my database. And that migration is executed here. I can write what is the new version, the old version, and the type of the migration that I'm performing. Actually, not the type, but more specifically the actions that needs to be performed in the current migration. And this happens in this block. The next thing that I need to prepare is my initialize Realm function. I create again as a code snippet. Initializing Realm is a function that has 1 parameter, which is if we need to check for main thread. As Realm is not thread safe, you need to be extremely careful when you're passing objects from one thread to another. And also when you create one Realm on, let's say, the main thread or a background thread, you cannot pass it and change the thread of the Realm instance. That means that you need to be extremely careful with the things that you're doing. My main instance, which is static, constant, is called Realm. And it is checking for the main thread. Because when I start my application, most of the times I'm going to have to fetch objects to update something or just to execute a migration. And if I open few instances of Realm, I may have a race condition, which may lead to plenty of problems because I would not have executed my migration, especially if it is a big migration. So that is why I'm checking for main thread if that parameter is set to true. And then I'm just trying to initialize Realm, and then if there is a problem, I'm going to throw an exception. So I have 2 different ways to initialize Realm. I already told you why I'm doing it with the static constant here, which is going to be the main method for reading data from Realm. I'm going to show you how to do it in a bit. But sometimes when I'm writing data or when I'm performing actions which may take longer, then I'm initializing a background Realm. Also, because of thread safety, if you're downloading let's say 10 megabytes of information from the backend and you need to write in the database, it is not going to be cool to put that one on the main thread. So by just calling the class variable background Realm, it is going to initialize a new Realm, which is not going to check if it is on the main thread or not. It is just going to initialize it if that is possible. And if it is not possible and throws an error, it's going to crash your application. The next thing that we're going to show is the way that we're fetching data from GitHub API. Something that I'm using, again, as a reference when I'm starting a project, it is a software which is called PO. Something really good about PO is that when you're specifying what you're doing, like the API URL, you can specify headers, URL params or body authentications and other options, it is going to create you a really simple way to call requests and to implement them again like a starting point, something so you can quickly check the API, see the data, see your parsing, and then you can implement something custom that is going to handle all the operations that you need. So for doing the easier demo of what I'm doing here, I'm going to use a WAMOFR. Why I decided to use a WAMOFR? It is because it provides a lot of functionality to the project and you don't have to implement it yourself. Yeah, it has downsides. For example, it puts a lot of code which is going to slow your builds. Also, there are going to be things that you don't know how they're happening because it's a third-party code. But still, it is an amazing way to quickly go and have something useful and something that is working on the project. Especially when you're creating a startup, you need things that work and you need them fast. So by using a WAMOFR, you're getting a lot of pros and some cons. In order to fetch the information from GitHub API, I'm going to just use that function, which is called fetch issues. Typically, I'm creating one enum, which is called API, and it is a string enum, which is also URL convertible. I'm doing that because for me, it is easy to just specify the request that I'm calling that way. Especially if you're using URLs or you want to concatenate URLs, it is extremely useful to have it specified like this and not to have it hard-coded in the requests. Because if something changes on the backend side, then you may have to change it on 5 places. And if you miss one, then you're going to have a bug, which is not cool. With a WAMOFR, you can just call a request and then you're specifying the methods. You have 4 more additional parameters that I'm going to show you in a bit. And then you can just select response JSON, which is giving you an any object in the response value that you can then parse and do whatever you want to do. We're checking for errors. If we have an error, we are going to return it in the completion handler. Then we're checking if we have a JSON array or something like this. If we don't have it, I have specified 2 enums, which are also errors, like request error, and I'm going to just pass that error to the caller of that function in the completion handler. And then if everything is fine, I'm just going to try to parse all the data that I have right now. And here we have like let issues equals response JSON array.map, and we're going to create issues from the values that I have here. You might have seen that I don't actually have a constructor or initializer here, but actually I do, but it is just not here. Because realm objects are providing a really cool way to initialize them easily by just passing the value and then you specify it here. It needs to be of any kind. It may not be nullable. That means that you need to pass any which has a value. And something important here is that you can call this. I forgot what I was about to say. Yeah, something important is that you can call this here, and it is not going to directly save the object to your realm. It is just going to provide you an instance that you can manage. After that, you can edit it. You can do whatever you want with it. So the thing that I'm doing here is just to pass it in the completion handler. And the third thing that I'm using is the sync manager. I'm using the sync manager for easier way to manage the synchronization between the backend and the mobile application. Because here, for example, we're just fetching data, but imagine that you have a more complex backend that users are doing and interacting with the application. And then they're sending the data to the backend, but also the backend returns the data which it has on the backend side. And then you may have more complex actions which needs to be specified and executed in a certain way. That is why I'm executing everything in the sync manager. So I'm going to show you the function that I'm using here, which is called vault issues. It is simple enough. It is just calling the request manager, the function fetch issues. And then if I want to handle the errors, I can do it right here. And the last thing that I do in that function is to get the realm, more specifically the background realm, because I'm going to execute write transactions. And then I'm going to just say try realm.write, which is going to execute write transaction in the block. I'm going to add the issues that I have fetched from the backend, initialize the subjects, and also I'm specifying the update parameter. The update parameter is optional. If you don't provide it, it is going to try to add the project and the objects directly to your database. But if these objects are already available, then you're going to have a crash in the application because you have not specified what should Realm do when you're updating them. And you have a few different options. You can just write all, modified, or none. That's going to be the update strategy here. I have missed one closing brackets, which I have fixed. The last thing that I'm going to do here is to throw a notification, which is going to tell to everyone that is subscribed in the application that the issues has been fetched. In order to have a clean way to post notifications with such name, I have created an extension for notifications, which is going to It makes your life a lot easier because you can use the autocomplete. For example, when I go to the sync manager, and if I want to just write here the name, I'm going to write issue fetched, and that's all. And these are my three main managers that I'm using in most of my applications. They're maybe not the perfect way to handle it, but it is a way that for me makes my life a lot easier when the complexity of the application grows. Because in most of the cases, the complexity of an application grows exponentially as the time goes by. And by having these three managers specified as classes with static functions and static variables without doing too many static variables and static functions, this has proven to me to be the best way to go and get the job done. So from the UI part, I have one loading view controller, which in most of the applications that I write is used as a starting view controller, which is going to either navigate the user to the application or to a login screen or something like this, which can be a custom flow specified from the developer. So here in the application, I'm just going to change the segue that is going to be performed as soon as the loading view controller appears. Something really cool about the loading view controller is that you can create animations. Because if you want to do any actions on the launch application, on the launch screen storyboard, you're not able to do it. Because you are not able to create a view controller that is going to perform anything. So this can be only a static. And when you have a loading view controller, you can just act with it as it is a standard view controller. So we're going here with having a PR table view controller, which was in the beginning called issue table view controller, but that doesn't matter. We have a standard way for catching the notification that something has happened, and we have new data that needs to be updates the table. I've implemented it in two ways. I'm going to speak about Combine and SwiftUI in a bit. So I'm going to show the second way, but the standard is just creating an Objective-C function, reward data, and just refresh the data that you're having in the table. Nothing special is done here. Something that I'm doing, especially when I have table view cells, and more specifically when they're custom and a bit more complex, is to create a function which is called setup cell. And I'm passing as an argument the data that I'm going to use to set up that cell. So here it is the issue. We have the PR name label, the PR ID label, and the PR description label, which are shown as a UI here in that storyboard. And if I did everything correctly, then my application should be able to build. Most probably I have missed something, but we're going to see in a second. Okay, while we're building, I'm going to start showing you something that's I have created. But first, actually, let's check if I'm not missing anything here. So yeah, I believe that I have set everything that needs to be set. As right now, Apple are developing many new stuff, which are really cool technologies and frameworks that can be used after iOS 13 and iOS 14. I have decided to create the same demo in the standard way, which for me right now is going to be the recommended way by using storyboards. But I have decided to do it also in Swift UI and using combined framework. So I can present you how things are getting more complex or actually more simple. Okay, it seems that this has built. Yep, that's part of my Swift UI, which I'm going to present you a bit. So try number 2. And hopefully this application is going to run on my simulator. In order to have Swift UI working in a storyboard application, okay, it starts running, and hopefully this is going to show me all the data that I have here, or not. We're going to see in a bit. Okay, so here we have like our table, and these are all the issues and pull requests which are currently available in the Swift Package Manager repository. If you want to confirm that I'm not lying to you, we're going to just go and write Swift Package Manager, and we're going to see, actually they don't have issues, they have pull requests. And this is experiment.coy, fixed rate safety, RFC performance. And here we have everything. That is open right now. So that was the first part of our demo today. The second part is Swift UI. So I was on the step that in order to have Swift UI working with the standard storyboard, you need to use one special controller, which was introduced in the latest version of Swift, of Xcode and iOS, and it is called Child Hosting View Controller or Child Hosting Controller. The thing that is doing this is just to have your Swift UI view contained somewhere. And in order to have your UI available here, Actually, I have created one extremely simple list view in the Swift UI, which contains the objects that I need to present in a similar UI. In order that thing to run, oh, okay, it runs. So you can see mostly the same thing that we're seeing here, but implemented entirely with Swift UI. So we have, again, a table view cell or a list view cell. We have the main view, and we have the child hosting controller, which is initialized that way. So it contains our root Swift UI. And in order to be able to debug and to see the changes that we're having here, you need to specify a preview of the screen that you're having. What does Swift UI gives us? Well, it is really simple to use. You can do a lot of amazing things with it. And it is fast. And something that is really cool for me is that you can directly type the code that you need here, or you may even call for a parameter or special style or special elements that you would like to have on a property. For example, if I want to change the, let's say, mask, not mask, but opacity of the text, I can just drag this to the element that I want to, and it is going to directly add me the property in the code, which is pretty cool and works fast. Yeah, it has downsides. I don't know if you can hear it through my microphone, but right now my MacBook is running on 100% fans, and it is trying to get itself on fire. But that's the thing that you need to do in order to use the new technology. It's not extremely optimized for now, at least for the building process. And in order to have my data available in the Swift UI, I needed to specify identifiable. So the issue object, the issue class that I have here is identifiable. That means to have an ID, which needs to be a certain type. And also, in order to be able to provide events and to automatically update my Swift UI view, I needed to initialize the so-called data store. So the data store is a class that is storing all the data, the thing that it says. And I have varied it as observable observed object. That means that whatever the property in this instance changes, it is automatically going to update the data and present it here on the screen. And the data store class is extremely simple. It is a class which is singleton, and we have add published var issues, which is an array of local data manager realm object issue self. And actually, that's the way that I'm loading data. I don't think that's I have said that to you. Maybe you have seen it in the PR table view controller. And to finish the implementations that I have used to be able to use Combine in my project, I'm going to present you how to use URL session with Combine in order to just fetch all the different objects and the things that are available on GitHub. So when you're using URL session with Combine, actually it makes things extremely simple. You can just go and use TryMap in order to see if all the data that comes is the data that you need, if you don't have any errors, and etc. Then decoding the data that is coming from the server is also extremely easy because you have an integrated decode function. You can use map error. I'm using that if something happens and I'm not able to parse the data, it throws that error, which I have specified here. Then I'm going to say that I would like to have this on the main queue, and I'm going to use the function erase to any publisher. I'm not going to get in detail why I'm using it. I'm going to say that if we want to have universal publishers and to be able to implement custom classes that are publishers, you need to use that function so you can cast the response that is getting from all of this to any publisher. So it is universal and you can handle it everywhere. I need a place to call this function, and it is going to be from my sync manager. So I'm going to just call the function sync, actually use a snippet sync combine. I need to specify a static variable which is called dispose back. Because when we're using the function sync, which is converting from a combine structure to the most known closures for us, you need to use sync. And you have two different closures here. You have one which is executed at the end always, which is for the result, and you're specifying it here. And then you have one which is the received value. In order for me to be able to use it in a bit simpler way, I have created that one as a future return type, which is extremely similar to the promises that are used in Node.js and JavaScript at all. We're doing again something I forgot to tell you. In order to write that data to our Realm database, I'm using try_map, which is getting the results from fetch issues, and it is going to download them to write them to our database locally, and I'm going to return the issues so it can continue down. If I don't write the function store at the end, that's important because we're using automatic reference counting. My object is going to get destroyed even before it has finished its function, like its operation. So you need to store the result of that thing in the dispose back, which is provided here. And again, I have a similar dispose back available in the data store. Okay, it was not in the data store. Let me just find where was the other implementation. Okay, whatever. As I'm loading the data only here, I actually don't need it anywhere else. So yeah, when we use vault issues combine, actually I can, oh yeah, here it is. I'm actually using the same dispose back. So the vault all data function, I'm going to comment vault issues, and I'm going to use vault issues combine. And something else that I'm going to do is on the storyboard to get the reference to that storyboard segue, which says to Swift UI. And I'm going to just place it in the loading view controller so I can change my navigation. I'm going to restart the application, and fingers crossed everything is going to work out fine. Yep, here it is. We have the same functions, actually almost the same view which we had with the previous demo, which was using the storyboards. We have it implemented with Swift UI. I'm giving you both options so you can see the ways that the implementation goes, and also you can decide which one is better for your project. Something that I'm not going to have time to cover is some of the useful tools that I'm using for future-proof development. I'm going to start with SwiftLint, which is a linter, which as I wrote, it is for watching your language. That means that, for example, when I'm initializing or when I'm using the forced casting, or when I create an extremely long function or extremely short variable, the linter is going to show me an error or a warning that says, okay, that's not fine. You need to rename it. You need to change the length of the function. Or if you have like extremely long function, it's going to tell you that the complexity or the length is just too big and you need to shorten it. And that way, when you're working in a team with, let's say, 3, 4, 5 or more people, it is going to get easier for all the people to get to similar coding style, and that is going to improve the development and the readability of the code. I'm using all the time Fastlane, which is automating the build process that we have on our project. For example, as soon as we have a new pull request or something else happens, Fastlane gets triggered on a CI and executes the linting process, automatically testing the current project if we have automated tests, which we do have on all our projects. And then it uses Swodder and coveralls to upload the code coverage information to coveralls. As I already show you, I'm using PO as my main REST client, so I can easily check an API. And I'm using Postman sometimes when I want to share all the information about the REST with my colleagues. QuickType is the tool that I have used for parsing a JSON easily, just to orient myself faster in the different types of objects, properties, and whatever that we have inside a JSON. And some of the other useful tools that also I don't have to cover is like OneSignal, which is an amazing push notification tool. Firebase, which is all-in-one tool for mobile applications. It has like analytics, databases, and so many other stuff. And sometimes I'm using branch.io, which is for deep linking software, and it has extremely cool analytics. So yeah, thank you very much for staying with me. And I'm going to write you also my GitHub. Actually, I'm not going to write, I'm just going to get to my profile so I can easily copy paste it. I'm going to upload this thing to my repository. I'm going to name it, let's just see what's going to be the best way, iOS application structure. And it's going to be available on that place maybe in about 30 minutes or so. I don't know if Iskren is still available. Yeah, he is here. Do we have a way to see if we have any questions or comments here?
Yeah, I'm monitoring the chat and the question section. So please type in your questions.
Okay, somebody wrote a cool cat, so I'm going to put it again. Okay, so I'm following also questions sent from friends to say something about the CI platforms that we're using. Actually, we as a company have spent plenty of money on Circle CI in the last 2 years for doing all the CI operations on our site. And we're slowly migrating to GitHub Actions. And we're using GitHub Actions with the so-called local runner, which is a Mac Mini in our office, which is all the time online and is executing everything. Why? Because in Circle CI, we have been spending about $300 a month in the beginning just to be able to build 5 iOS projects and to be able to release nightly versions. And with GitHub Actions, we get all of that for free. We just need to do the first investment of buying a Mac Mini. And the Mac Minis with the M1 processor are complete beasts. Our machine in the office is like that, and it is almost as good as my 16-inch MacBook Pro. So yeah, right now we're just paying for the electricity, and everything else comes from GitHub Actions. So yeah, do we have any other questions?
We can wait for a few more seconds.
Okay, I have one more question. That's a personal message. Handling of authentication and how does it happen? There are many different ways that you can do exactly that one. Actually, something that I wrote, something that I read yesterday was that with URL session and combine, you can just make the handling and retry a request exact number of times. And I'm going to execute that. For example, when we need to communicate with the backend and when we have a short-living JW T token, which like 15 minutes or so, we're going to maybe have to update it at least once for a session. And the way that I'm going to implement that structure right now using combine is that when we get error codes coming from the server, like 401 or 43 or whatever was picked up for handling the expired token, I'm just going to execute the fetching of a new token, and then I'm going to retry the current request. If it fails for a second time, that means that something is wrong with user's session, and I'm just going to kick the users out. I have implemented another structure which is using the same thing using a WAMFR. It works with an interceptor of the requests, but it gets extremely complicated for maintenance, especially when you're currently developing the application on the backend side and when you have to manage a few different things or edit it. So in order to simplify it, I have just created a request handler that is doing the exact same thing as in combine, but it is just using it with closures. So yeah, that's the way that I do it. I may prepare a lecture about this in the next year potentially. Maybe it's going to be interesting.